Through our Canadian Sportfishing website, Ask Italo, and all the other avenues on the internet that people can get a hold of me, I commonly get asked, how do you properly fill a spinning reel with line? And I'm going to show you because it is important. If you fill your reel wrong, if you have too much line or you put it on the wrong way, you will have lots of problems, like line twist, which will develop into major tangles, and it will really spoil your fishing. For you to understand why it needs to be put on properly, you have to understand the way it's actually put on the spools in the factory. This spool of Suffolk's 832 braid is probably the strongest braid on the market. And you have to be especially careful when you load it onto a spinning reel because it's very slippery. That's why you can cast far with it. It's very sensitive. It has no memory and it also has no stretch. So you have to secure it to the spool really well. But let me explain to you that when this material is created, it's done on a very large spool. And then it's transferred onto the smaller spools. When it's transferred onto these smaller spools, and this particular one is 150 yards, machines actually turn it clockwise, and that's the way the line goes on. The last thing you want to do is put a spool on the ground or have somebody hold it like this, horizontal, and have the line come off it because it'll create twist. Especially when you consider that the reel, when it rotates, when you turn it, also turns clockwise, okay, in a clockwise position. So right off the bat, the proper way to take the line off is not to take it off the end of the spool so it flies off, but take it off the way it went on. It has to come off this way. To do that, you're going to need a couple of tools. The first one is some kind of a pencil or pen. I have a Sharpie marker, and what we're going to be doing is actually puncturing the center of the spool. That's where we're going to be putting the marker. So I'm going to push it through. Okay, I've got the marker there. That's what's going to hold it in place. Ideally, if you can have someone help you hold it while you reel it on, they can put pressure with their fingers as the line is coming off. If you're on your own, what I do is actually hold the sides of the pen or pencil with my foot, my 2 feet. So in just a moment, I'm going to place this down, place it in between my shoes, and that's what will apply the pressure to hold it in that position. But the first thing I have to do is tie the line onto the reel. I've got the rod ready to go fishing, but I'm not going to put the line right off the tip. I'm going to take the last guide. I'm going to put the line through. I'm going to pass that line down to the reel. Now, a very important step here, before you make any kind of a knot to put the line onto the reel, it is extremely important that you open the bail. Okay? So you do not want to tie the line with the bail closed because then when you open the bail, it won't be able to pick up the line. So you open the bail on the spinning reel. What I try to do is to take my line, I create a loop like this, and with the tag end of the line, I make 1 half hitch. I leave enough room so I can make a couple of okay, so there's my half hitch right there on my main line. I'm going to make 2 or 3 half hitches, one after the other. So this is kind of like a noose knot, but very simple. So let's do 3 half hitches. Okay, I'm going to do 3 half hitches. I'm going to pull it nice and tight. Now you'll notice that this loop now can slide. I can pull it back or I can tighten it. I'm going to take the tag end now and I'm going to trim it. So this is where you either need scissors or a sharp knife. I have a very sharp Rapala knife. And this braid is hard to cut, but it's no problem for the Rapala knife. So I'm going to cut the tag end. I'm going to leave a little bit. Now with the spool open, I'm going to make sure that the bail is open. I'm going to put the loop over the spool of the line and I'm going to pull it tight. And I'm going to snug it up. Now, that may slip. So what I do, and this is really handy because you don't need any additional tape. Remember our spool of line that's right here? See, it has a little Suffolk sticker. I'm going to take that sticker off. I'm not going to use the whole thing, but I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to cut a very small section of it, maybe 1/3. It's probably just made out of paper or like a plastic material. Okay, I'm going to take off about 1/3 of it. I'm going to put the rest on there because it's going to help me to keep the line from slipping. I'm going to take that little piece of adhesive that I have right there, and you can see where the line is on my reel, and I'm going to put it right over the middle of the line. Now this is a tiny reel. It's almost like a light action or ultralight. You can see that I've affixed it there. When I start reeling on my line, that adhesive is going to make sure that that braided line will not slip. So I'm going to do 2 or 3 wraps, not very strong. Now the important part again, I'm going to take the spool, make sure that the line is coming off it at the front. I want it to come off the same way it went on in the factory. I'm going to be reinserting my pencil or marker, and I'm going to be placing it in between my feet. I'm going to use the two sides of my shoes and I'm going to hold it in place, but instead of just letting it go loose, I'm putting my foot down so the spool is touching the bottom of the boat. You can do this on the carpet at home. Like I say, it's easier if you have a person holding it, but right now I'm ready to spool it on. So now I can control the amount of pressure by how much I push the rim of the spool against the floor. And I can also apply pressure by holding the line here. So I'm going to do that because I want to make sure that when I start putting the line on, it's going to be nice and tight. So you can hear the spool and you can see it go around. That line is going on nice and tight. I'm going to turn it. You can see how tight it's going on there. The drag is almost going, so sometimes you have to tighten the drag a little bit harder. The reason you want that line tight on the bottom, you want it to be packed. And as you start filling the spool, you put less tension on it. So that when you're fishing and you set the hook and it happens to be the bottom, or you're trolling and you set the hook and it's the bottom, or a big fish, the layers of line won't cut down right down to the bottom of the spool. So it's very important that at least half your spool, the line is what we call packed. It's nice and tight. And then of course the line that's being cast and retrieved or trolled with or fished with is going to be looser and also be picking up water. So it's going to be a little bit looser on top. Okay, so you watch the spool. Between my feet, you can see how it's coming off nice and tight. Now I'm going to let off a little bit of the pressure so you can see that it's coming off easier. As you're getting close to actually filling your spool, it's very important that you have at least 1/8 of an inch between the top of your line to the edge of the spool. I know some people like to fill their reel right up, and the problem there is that the line has a tendency of coming off, or a greater chance, because once you start fishing and you do pick up water on your line, you get a little bit of expansion and the line doesn't pack as well. And then when you go to cast, there's a chance of some of the line coming off prematurely, and that creates a loop which eventually creates a tangle. Okay, so I'm going to reel this a little bit longer, and I'm going to make sure that it's got some tension on it, and then I'm going to cut the end off, and then we're going to put it in the actual line tag. Okay, so I'm just going to trim this like so, and now I've got the end of line, and I'm going to reel it right down. And most reels, especially the Rapala reels, have a little line holder right on the side of the spool. I'm just going to use my fingernail to put the line underneath that little plastic shield, and I'm going to pull it tight. Now it's secured underneath. Now it's not going to fly off. So you don't have to have your line strung through your rod and have your hooks on it. So now you can put a fluorocarbon leader or a wire leader, or just tie your line directly. If you put on your line properly on your spinning reel, you won't have any problems with line twist unless you have your drag set too light. So a lot of people, when they hook a fish and their drag isn't set properly, will reel in while the drag is engaging. So the problem there is that you are actually twisting the line. Okay, so to prevent line twists, make sure you put the line onto your spinning reel properly, like I just showed you. Make sure that the drag is set fairly tight just before breaking point. And if you do hook a fish or get hung up on the bottom, if you hear the drag going, don't reel in against it. Pull back with your rod and then reel down. Okay, so you don't want to reel in when you hear your drag going out, because that just twists the line in one spot. If you do those few things, you're going to get a lot more enjoyment out of your fishing.